Hello, my name's Marilla Walker. I'm a sewing pattern designer, and this video is a tutorial of how to sew buttonholes on a standard sewing machine. So if you've got a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine, you should be able to create a buttonhole. So I will give a demonstration of how to sew this using an automatic buttonhole feature, which some machines have, and also creating a buttonhole just with the zigzag stitch. So marking out what size you want and then going from there with the zigzag stitch. So hopefully this is of help to you. There will be a follow-up video with sewing buttonholes by hand, so look out for that one, and I hope you enjoy watching this video. Thank you very much. Bye. Hello there. Today I am going to run through how I will sew a buttonhole using my sewing machine onto this fine cotton lawn fabric, which I have interfaced part of it, which is where I'm going to sew my buttonhole. You need the interfacing to stabilize the fabric, otherwise the buttonhole can really pucker the fabric. So to start off with, most machines come with, or a lot of machines that do buttonholes come with a buttonhole foot. This is the one for my machine, and it has an area on the back where you can put your button into. So this is the right way of the buttonhole, but I find if I put it upside down, actually the it grips in a bit more, and it gives a more accurate size of the actual buttonhole when it's sewing. That's just something I found through trial and error. So if I just take off my standard foot that's on the machine, and I'll put that to one side, and then I shall put my foot into the machine, which has got the button in place. It just simply clicks in like that. And then on my machine at the back, there is, let me see if I can show you. There's this pull down guide. Now that needs to sit against the foot here, okay? And that's what's telling the machine what size the button is on the back. So it's all connected to this buttonhole foot, and it will tell the machine what length to sew the buttonhole. So it's all very clever. Right, so how a buttonhole works on this particular machine is on the dials here, I've got a buttonhole function that I need to twist this dial to, and also I need to turn this dial as well, and then that will enable me to sew my buttonholes. It's different on every machine, so it is something that you're going to have to read in your manual, but they kind of all have a similar way of working. So that's how it works on this machine, and it's a Burnett B35, just for reference. Right, let's get sewing. Right, so I've just roughly folded my fabric as if it was a placket of a shirt, let's say, and so I'll pop it in here. Whoopsie. Just slide it in to where my fake buttonhole is going to go, or my demonstration buttonhole is going to go. And then because it's all automatically set, all I need to do is put my foot on the pedal and sew the buttonhole. Okay, right, so let's get going. Right, so that's done all of the stitching it needs to do. On my machine, once you finish, you then have to click to this reset, and that will enable you to stitch. Okay, so I've removed it all from the sewing machine, and the fact is I've actually sewn it on the wrong side. If this were a real garment, this folded side of the placket would actually be the back, and that would be the front. But you always sew a buttonhole from the front of the garment, because you can hopefully see that the stitching on this front side is a lot nicer and a little bit more raised than this reverse side. So that's my fault. That obviously you wouldn't have this interfacing poking out beyond a placket, so this is just for demonstration. Right, so let's pretend this is on the right side, and I'll show you how to open it up. Okay, so I've got this unpicker here, which came free with my machine. So if you've got a sewing machine, hopefully you will have one of these things too, because they come in very handy for all sorts of mistakes and whatnots. So what I do with this is I go right in up close to the stitching, but not actually catching any stitches, and then I'll poke a hole through without stabbing my hand. You can also use a sewing awl for this if you've got like a pointy metal implement, and I just poke a bit of a hole. You can actually use the seam ripper or unpicker to slide all the way through, but that can lead to accidental going too far and actually ripping through the buttonhole stitches, you know. So if you just get carried away and slide right the way through your buttonhole, it's happened to all of us. So I wouldn't advise that if you've got a nice sharp pair of scissors that you could use instead. There are other tools you can get specifically for opening buttonholes, like you can get a buttonhole chisel. I don't actually have one, but let's use this ruler. So it would be smaller than the buttonhole length, and then you would have a board underneath, and then you would just hammer it, and it would cut a nice clean straight line in your buttonhole. I've never used one of those before, so I just use my unpicker and a pair of scissors. So either a nice sharp pair of embroidery scissors. I've got these really unusual applique scissors which I'm going to use because they're nice and sharp, and again being careful not to snip any of the stitching. There we go, we've cut through that. Oops, put it on camera. There we go, so that's all cut through. And then what I like to do is, because it's inevitable it's going to fray, where the bits that haven't been caught by the stitching, I just go through and I pull it away as soon as I've sewn it, and then I go in again with my scissors and I just chop away these little frayed bits. Again, not cutting any of the stitches, okay, because you can get this product called Fray Check, which is basically like a glue, I think, and you can put it on the area before you, I'm not actually sure, either it's before or after you cut the buttonhole open. I think it's before, and it stops all of these ends from coming loose. But I don't like to do that. I don't actually like to use products, you know, it's just something else to buy. It's more plastic to have the glue, you know. And I think you can get quite a nice finish just by going through and cleaning it up straight after you've sewn it. Let's see if I can just get a few more. So you can do a better job than me, obviously, but I think that's good enough. So that's my final buttonhole there. Okay, so let's go and find my button in my sewing machine and check that it fits. Right, so the moment of truth. Ta-da! It fits! So that's how I sew a buttonhole on my sewing machine with the automatic feature. So you can see it's just made up of zigzag stitches, so you can make it up with just zigzag stitches, and I will run you through that now. So hold on a minute. So if I can just bring you down here for a minute. Should I bring you closer? I think that will do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure my button, and now this is in preparation to sew a buttonhole without using an automatic feature on a sewing machine. Now this button measures 1.8 centimeters. So as a general rule of thumb, it's the measurement of the button plus half a centimeter. So that would take us to 2.3 centimeters. Now we can just quickly cheat and actually measure the buttonhole that we've already made, and that is actually 2.3 centimeters. So that is a miracle. That just shows that the way to estimate it is correct. Right, so what I'll do, I've got some tailor's chalk here, and I'll measure the length of the button quite badly, and where I want the slit to be. Oh God, sorry. Right, so that's where we're going to have our buttonhole, and I'm just going to use the zigzag stitch on my machine to sew it. So let's go and do that. Right, so I'm just going to quickly explain. We're just going to create this stitch, this buttonhole manually using the zigzag on our machine, and for each stage we're going to adjust the zigzag stitch length and width. So for this first part here, this beginning bit, I'm going to use the widest zigzag I've got, which will be 5, and it will be on stitch length 0, because we don't actually want any length on it, because it just needs to go side to side a few times. And then for the next step, to go backwards, I will have to use the reverse lever to stitch up the chalk line, and for that I'm going to use 2mm wide zigzag, and I'll adjust this to the 1 for the stitch length, stitch distance. So does that make sense? So 1 for how far apart the zigzags are, and 2 will be the width of that zigzag. So I'll do that all the way up there, and then I'll go back to doing a 0 stitch distance and the widest zigzag, and then to come all the way back down, I'll go back down to that small zigzag of 2 width and 1 length. Hope that makes sense. Oh my gosh, right, let's have a go. Right, here goes. So I'm on my widest zigzag, shortest stitch distance, and we're going to get this buttonhole started. Okay, fabulous. Right, so I'm going to now change to a narrower zigzag with a very short stitch distance, and let's see, we need to line it up with the edge. Right, and then I use my backwards lever, and let's go for it. Might make the stitch distance between 0 and 1 actually, because it seems a bit too far apart otherwise. Right, so got to the other end of the buttonhole, and now I need to use the widest zigzag, the shortest stitch distance, just to cap off the end of that buttonhole, and then we'll go back to the narrower zigzag. So I've used 2mm wide zigzag and between 0 and 1 stitch length again. And then before I get sewing down this buttonhole, I just want to make sure it's lining up nicely with that top zigzag. Okay, so I've just moved my fabric along to put it in the right place. And then to finish off, you could just do another bit of a wide zigzag on top of the original one you started with. Oops, whoa, that's misaligned. Oh well, let's have a look and see what we've got. So I'll cut the threads on this, and actually it's not looking too bad, I think. Snip the threads. Oh, almost looking better than my automatic one. Right, so you can see on the way back down the stitches have actually gone a lot closer together, and I think it's also done that on the automatic buttonhole, so it's obviously that's how my machine wants to be doing it. But actually you can see there's not a lot of difference. So if you don't have an automatic buttonhole function on your machine, or you know, if you've got a really old machine that just has straight stitch or zigzag, but you are able to adjust the widths and the stitch lengths, then it's very achievable to do a good enough buttonhole. So again, I shall cut this open in the same way I did before, being very careful. I mean, it's there is a little bit of variation in the stitches compared with the automatic one, but it looks good enough to me. The big test will be to see if the button fits in it. Okay, so here we go. Does it fit? Yep. Goody good goods. Okay, so again I would pull away all of these frayed edges and snip them off. But yeah, that's pretty good to go. So, you know, it's I think my tips would be, you know, take your time, make sure you mark your buttonholes thoroughly, like just be really as precise as you can manage before you get sewing anything. Do practice ones. I mean, obviously this is a practice piece of fabric. Yeah, and make sure you take proper precautions like stabilizing your fabric. This is very important. In fact, actually I shall just do a quick one without the interfacing just to show you the difference. Right, so whilst you weren't looking, I went ahead and I sewed a buttonhole on the side of fabric without the interfacing. This is my one that I forgot to pull the guide down for the length of the buttonhole, which is essential with this foot. So it would have just gone on forever. So that was my mistake, because I'm capable of making them too. But back to the point is, you can see without the interfacing, it is a puckered buttonhole. You can see at the top and bottom end where it's really pulled in the fabric, it's cinched it in because it's so lightweight. So it's well worth putting this interfacing on. Again, because this is a demonstration piece, if this was a real garment, you would not be seeing this interfacing poking out. It would have stopped inside the fold. So it would not be visible under normal circumstances. But with the interfacing, these are much stronger, much more durable, much neater buttonholes. So it's worth taking the time to do it properly. So yeah, interfacing is essential. Marking your buttonholes if you do not have a machine with a button guide is essential. So the measurements that I go by for a standard type of button such as this is the diameter of the button plus ½ centimeter, and that should give you a good buttonhole. But always sew on a test piece of fabric first, rather than doing your first buttonhole test on the main garment, because it is heartbreaking to get to the end of sewing something that you've worked so hard on and then ruin it with the buttonholes. But you know what? They're not that scary. If you just take those precautions to get it right, they are not a scary thing to do. It's just another function on your sewing machine. Even though I need to tell myself that because I get irrationally scared by them too. So anyway, I wish you luck and happy sewing buttonholes. Bye. Just quickly popping back to say a final goodbye and thank you for watching if you made it all the way through. Hopefully I covered enough stuff that you feel confident having a go at doing them yourselves. They are not scary, buttonholes. Really just the key is to practice on scrap fabric first and gain your confidence that way before you actually go onto your main fabric. Obviously I've used a contrasting thread so it's very visible, but use a matching thread on your real fabric, and any of the little anything that looks slightly off of place you won't notice if it's in a matching thread. And so yeah, just go for it and have fun and happy sewing. Bye.